The goal of a character, its function, is to act as a simplified model of a human being and teach you something about real human beings. As a result of that, one of the most interesting things that a character can do is change their mind. Changing other people's minds is something we all want to know how to do, and so when we see a character changing their mind, we pay attention, assuming, of course, that the way their mind is changed makes sense to us. I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about a character slowly changing throughout the plot as they make decisions that turn them into another person. I want to discuss a process that is smaller and quicker, a character realizing that they had been wrong about a specific subject, changing their mind about a specific opinion or idea. There are many ways to make a character change their mind. One is to confront them with facts and logic. This is probably the most boring way because we know intuitively that it rarely works in real life. We can find examples for this, but these examples rarely move us emotionally. A more interesting way for a character to change their mind is to have the character confront their own emotions, the fear and attachment that are making them hold on to a specific belief. By reconciling their own emotions, the character is forced to admit what they had known to be true all along. But there is another way that people change their mind, a way that is human and irrational and extremely realistic, and yet I can't think of any fictional depiction of it, except for that one scene in The Bear, Season 1, Episode 2, Hands. So let's get to the scene itself. The Bear is a show about a young chef, Carmy, who leaves his job in a high-end restaurant in New York in order to return to his hometown Chicago and run his late brother's restaurant. The difference between the two establishments is hard to miss. Ricky, a friend of the late brother who was running things in the meantime, is constantly clashing with Carmy over how the restaurant should be run. Carmy obviously has more experience and knowledge, which makes Ricky feel insecure and blame Carmy for being pompous, which only makes Carmy see Ricky as more of a slob. These tensions rise to a boil as a health inspector arrives to check the conditions in the kitchen and finds a pack of cigarettes by the stove, which is a severe health code violation. She gives the restaurant a bad sanitary score, which starts a fight between Carmy and Ricky. Each one is certain that the other one left the cigarettes there, but the reasons for being certain are very different. Carmy already thought of Ricky as a slob, and the idea that it was Ricky that left the cigarettes really fits in with that pre-existing belief. On the other hand, Ricky holds on to the idea that Carmy is to blame not because it makes sense, but because it makes his ego feel better. It makes him feel less inferior. This is a really hard conflict to resolve. One of them will have to take the blame. If I told you right now that by the end of the episode, Ricky will have changed his mind, admit that it was him that left the pack of cigarettes, and accept the blame, how do you think that could possibly happen? So one way would be to have Ricky logically come to the conclusion that Carmy, who stays in after everyone's left to clean the kitchen, that watches cooking shows in what little free time he has, is less likely to make such a mistake. Another way could be to have the sous chef, Sydney, who is significantly more agreeable than these two shouty men, attack the core emotional issue and tell Ricky that he is important and appreciated and that he has nothing to be insecure about. The thing that actually makes Ricky change his mind absolutely blows mine because it has nothing to do with what happened or even with Ricky's self-esteem. For that reason, it teaches you a much more valuable lesson about human beings. The scene goes like this. Sydney and Ricky go to buy cock, and when they are alone in the car, Sydney makes the obvious mistake of telling Ricky how talented and smart Carmy is. That, of course, makes Ricky feel more insecure, which only makes him more defensive. But then Ricky gets a phone call from his ex-wife. His daughter is having some trouble at school, and his ex-wife asks him to calm her down. When he talks to his daughter on the phone, Ricky, who up until now was all aggressive and loud, is suddenly gentle and kind and vulnerable. This, by itself, is a pretty cool thing to do with a character to show that they have a side to them that the viewer wouldn't expect. But that isn't the part that blows my mind. What blows my mind is what comes after. As Ricky talks to his daughter, he switches modes from asshole to caring father. Different parts of his brain are activated. His levels of testosterone decrease while his oxytocin levels increase. I made that last part up, but you know what I mean. Ricky changes physically from his ordinary state into a softer, more agreeable one, and when he's done with the phone call and goes back to thinking about the argument he had with Carmy, he's still in that agreeable state. And in that state, it's much easier for him to admit that he made a mistake. So he does. Carmi's shouting didn't make Ricky change his mind. Sydney's calm reasoning didn't make Ricky change his mind. What did change his mind is an entirely external factor, making him let go of his anger, at which point no further convincing was needed. He arrived at the correct conclusion all by himself. Why is this so important? Why am I making a video about this instead of making another video about the best book ever written? Because it conveys a really important message. When I see people trying to change other people's minds, I see them making one of two mistakes. If they're stupid, they're going to communicate how angry they are at the other person for having a different opinion, and then become even angrier when that doesn't make the other person change their mind. If they're smart, they're going to construct a rational, sound argument and just hurl it at their opponent, usually while being smug about how smart they are before they're even done talking. But I see very few people who notice the emotional state of the person in front of them and try to affect it to their advantage. And when I do see people doing that, it's mostly people I disagree with. When I see people that I agree with arguing with people that I don't agree with, there's often so much anger coming from my side, so much judgment and aggression that the other side is driven away and made to insist on their opinion even more. On the other hand, every time a fascist tried to convince me of their bullshit ideology, they were so nice about it. They made the effort to make me feel like I'm one of them, not their enemy. Every time a religious extremist tried to convince me of their bullshit ideology, they made me feel like they valued me and my opinion even if they disagreed. Why do they do this? Admitting that you were wrong puts you in a position where it's easy for the other person to mock you and judge you. In order to change your mind, you need to feel safe intellectually. But it's not all intellectual. My paternal grandfather, a man of very few words, gave me one piece of advice that I can remember, and it was this: wait until everyone's done eating before you start talking business. Did this Italian pasta aficionado know that a rise in insulin causes people to be more agreeable? Probably not. He just knew that after you eat a whole bunch of carbs, you're calmer, happier, and easier to talk to. Best relationship advice I ever got is a slight modification of this. If you're having a discussion with your partner and you notice you're both angry, just take a 5-minute break, grab a bite, and then go back to talking. See if the vibe hasn't changed. In conclusion, human beings are gross and strange, and working with them is a fucking nightmare. But they're all we've got, and we gotta learn how to work with them. One of the many ways in which we learn about human beings is by following fictional characters, and that's why it's so important to consume good art. Huge thanks to my beautiful... Oh, wait a second. I forgot something. In the end of the episode, we find out that Carmi was actually the one that left the cigarettes on the kitchen counter, which teaches that even if we were emotionally manipulated to change our mind, it doesn't mean that our new opinion is true. Stay sharp. Huge thanks to my beautiful patrons, especially the Duck and Zilch, for their comments on this essay. If you're interested in discussing writing and media analysis like this, you might want to join my Discord server, a place where we have discussions like this all of the time. On the last conference call, we spent 2 hours reading the first 2 paragraphs of No Country for Old Men, picking apart every single line. If you're interested in that sort of thing, check out my Patreon page below. Until next time, stay sharp, you hear?